Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to panel 4, actually the last panel of day 2 of the BGHRA conference. We're so excited for the conversations we've had thus far, and looking forward to those which are still yet to come. This afternoon, we have two exciting talks, one by Cherita Harrell, another by Reginald Bess. Um, our third presenter won't be able to make it, and so you might have seen Asia's name on the agenda as well, but she won't be able to make it. So we just have two for this afternoon panel. I'll start by introducing each of our speakers before they speak, and then we'll hold all of our questions and comments toward the end. I'll direct your attention to the bottom of the screen where it says Q&A. So please, at any time, you can just jump into that box and put your comments, observations, and questions. And again, we'll take those questions and comments at the very end after everyone has finished presenting. So feel free to make use of that. Also, in our chat feature, which is separate from Q&A, you will see the names of each of our presenters, as well as their email addresses and the titles of their talks. So you can also reach out to them independently if you should have further observations or questions you'd like to ask. So I'll start by introducing our first speaker, who I've also had the pleasure of just knowing from her time as an MFA student a few years ago at Rutgers Camden. So I'm happy to see her face and just hear her voice once more. So Cherita Harrell is a writer and senior lecturer at Rowan University. Her fiction has appeared in Decades Review, Minetta Review, and The Bleeding Line. And her essay, Water as Witness, Significance of Water in Our Shared Histories, was featured in the Quilting Water Global Public Arts Project. Her research focuses on critical literacy, racial literacy, and Black feminism, and it explores students' lived experiences through forms of creative expression, such as oral histories, narratives, visual media, and other literary contributions. The title of her talk is Quilting Water, Piecing Together Our Narratives. Cherita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Keith, and it's wonderful to see you again as well. Hello, everyone. My name is Cherita Harrell, and I am one of the lead artists with the Quilting Water Project. It is a privilege to be with you all today at the Black German Heritage and Research Association Conference, and an honor to discuss quilting water. If I may, I'd like to begin with an excerpt from the poem Belly Song by Etheridge Knight. You have made something out of the sea that blew and rolled you on its salt, bitter lips. It nearly swallowed you, but I hear you are tough and harder to swallow than most. And I must admit that the sea in you has sung to the sea in me. And I must admit that the sea in me has fallen in love with the sea in you because you have made something out of the sea that nearly swallowed you. And this poem I give to you. This poem is a song I sing to you from the bottom of the sea in my belly. This poem is a song about feelings, about the bone of feelings, about the stone of feeling, and the feather of feeling. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about Quilting Water, which is a global public arts project that emerged from the collective work of a group of artists at the Institute for the Study of Global Racial Justice at Rutgers University, Camden. The project weaves together stories, experiences, and voices from across the globe, focusing on our connections and relationship to water and reflecting on the diverse and rich experiences of communities around the world. As a part of the project, we have formed a partnership with a community of quilters, primarily from Camden County, New Jersey, who will make quilts in response to the oral histories from their own city and those collected globally. We call the project Quilting Water because our stories of water can be stitched together much like a quilt. By naming it Quilting Water, we not only honor the connected stories of water, but we also honor the artists who are making quilts in conversation with these stories from around the world. Ordinary people create literature too. In all forms of storytelling, everyday stories come from everyday people. To honor this, we invite people to participate in our interview process for the purpose of gathering, witnessing, and collecting these everyday stories through one of the oldest forms of storytelling, the oral tradition. Our interviews are invitations for gathering, for telling and retelling, for hearing, listening, and witnessing, for reflecting, dreaming, and wishing, and for collective sharing through the relationship between literature, art, and culture. So today, I would like to extend this invitation to all who are present and all who are listening. We would like to invite you to not only share your stories related to water, but to invite others to share their stories. This invitation includes 5 main questions. What is one memory you have of water? What stories have been passed on to you about water? What has water given you? What has water taken away? What do you wish or dream for water? These questions not only encourage conversations about water, but they also help to piece together stories of water that span continents and cultures. This project, however, transcends the mere collection of stories. It serves as a bridge between different cultures, disciplines, and communities, fostering dialogue and understanding across racial and geographical divides. I'd like to share a map of where we've collected stories about water. If you give me a second, I'll pull that up. So we've collected stories about water so far from New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, South Africa, Taiwan, Somalia, the Philippines, Japan, Sri Lanka, Senegal, Cabo Verde, Dominica, and Puerto Rico. We invite scholars, artists, and community members to join us in this meaningful exploration of our ecological urgencies through the form of storytelling. By participating in Quilting Water, you will have the opportunity to share your lived experiences, witness the lived experiences of others, and contribute to a growing tapestry of stories that not only honor our connections to water, but to each other. This project is not simply a call to action, but a call to engage in the powerful work of storytelling, learning, witnessing, and connecting, of piecing together our shared human experiences to create a more inclusive and empathetic world. And I like to share a video of a collection of our interviews and the quilts made by artists who will piece together these powerful stories.
One of the biggest memories is the fire hydrant. And I think that comes to mind. I grew up in New York City. So La Pompa, or the pump, which is the fire hydrant, was like constantly open. Folks found uses for that. I mean, as kids, we drank from that water. Nowadays, folks talk about hoses, garden hoses, and drinking from the hoses. I'm like, yo, we drank from fire hydrants, you know? So I think that's one that just sticks with me because it would it was in the middle of a city. People had to find ways to cool off, and the way they chose to do that was with water that really was supplied to prevent fires, but was used to prevent overheating, you know? Um, it became this playground, this water park, a river that kids would float like boats down, just like, you know, if I had to have to think of a memory, it's that. It's like driving in a car past a water hydrant that kids are playing at, somebody putting a can to that hydrant with holes in it, and having that be what washes the car as you drive past, and my father yelling, "Sube la ventana, put the window up," so he could drive through and just get the car like rinsed off, um, which is like really what sticks with me right now.
I would say the misconception that water is disconnected from us. I have the luxury of being able to live by the water, but as I grew up in our educational systems, it was always an otherness about water. And, which goes against my cultural understanding of everything being connected. And as I got older and I started to do my own vacationing, and I'm able to spend a significant amount of time in water across the world, I am always overwhelmed by, how connected, how lifelike it is. Was this deep, dark, scary kind of place. But as I've grown up, it's become this beautiful, comforting place to be able to witness life in water.
I think for me, what water has given is the ability to start over. By that, I mean that if I've had, even just inside of my body, had a really rough week, I know that if I drink more water and mind my business also, that something about that refreshes and renews. Water has given me my children, as I mentioned in the last response. I remember when I was pregnant with both of them, drinking like these giant like gallons every day, just because I wanted to make sure that I had enough and they had enough. There's nothing like stepping in a hot shower at the end of the day and there's just something about water touching you both from the outside and the inside that makes starting over, like resetting. There is this, maybe in it, this ancient baptismal power of like renewing a thing, rebirthing a thing, that is present in my relationship with water now, I think.
The idea of flimsy houses in the Bicol region, the idea of houses not being built to last, it was always because they knew that no house can be strong enough to withstand the strongest of storms. So what they did was they accepted or resigned themselves to this cycle of rebuilding after a storm. So they would just make the easiest to build houses, and the storm would come and ravage it, and it would get destroyed, and then they would just rebuild. So I think in a sense, as a country, not just speaking for myself, it's taken away a sense of stability from the people here. I remember talking to a development worker in the field of disaster response and management. They were saying that, especially in climate vulnerable countries, really development, one of the bottlenecks of development is that everyone just has to rebuild over and over again because of the disasters, because of storms. You can't really build infrastructure, you can't really build livelihood by the coastlines. You can't build it in a manner that would be constant, that would be always there, because you always have to plan for these storms. And I think that it also got the Philippines, or got the country stuck in this, as I was saying, this constant cycle of disaster and rebuilding, and disaster and rebuilding, always a reset button once or twice a year. Every time there's a storm, always back to square one when you're trying to build your life.
stays clean. Clean water is clean, drinkable water is an amazing thing. And through my work in different places of the world, I know that it is not a given. Did a project in Uganda where we, as the facilitators on the course, had to be really taking care that the water we were drinking was going to be good, clean, and that our bodies could cope with it. And that's so, it's so weird to be growing up where the water everywhere is fantastic quality and is enriching and it's good and it's clean, than to be in a place where it's not. And this is not only restricted to Uganda, but this is also in certain parts of Europe, where the water that is coming out of the tap is the last thing you want to be putting into your stomach, because of the metals that are being used, because the lack of proper sanitation on the bigger scale, and it seems so ridiculous, because clean water is something that everybody should have access to. I mean, it's kind of like the most basic food group, isn't it? Water.
So I'm going to drop in the chat 2 links that will help you get to know more about the project, as well as this invitation to either be interviewed for Quilting Water or to interview others. And I hope that you all are able to kind of reach out and share your stories about water, and in particular, your lived experiences. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherita, for that. I've seen a couple of those videos before, but every time I feel like I see a few different ones, and I'm always struck by the things that I'm learning and kind of understanding for the first time by listening to them. And thank you for those links in the chat as well. So I've just received word that our second presenter, Dr. Bess, couldn't log on. He was having some technical difficulties with his Zoom.
He's here. I'm getting ready to promote him.
Okay, wonderful. So I've just gotten word, as you now hear as well, that he is here. So we'll just give him a second just to come on and get ready. And again, if you have questions or even comments as observations, you can go ahead and put those in that Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll take those at the end of the second presenter. Yeah. So I think we're all, somewhat used to the Zoom world, but it's constant challenge to to stay connected. So great to see you, Dr. Bess. We're glad that you were able to sign on, and we'll give you a second to just get yourself together before we start formally. Okay, so if you're ready, you're good to go. You just have to unmute yourself. Your mic is still muted. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you now. Perfect.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
First thing, I don't know.
Give you a brief introduction, just what we already discussed, and then you can jump right in.
All right.
Okay. So wonderful. So our next presenter is Dr. Reginald A. Bess. He is the past president of the Southeastern Council of Latin American Studies, also the immediate past president of the College Language Association, He holds a BS in German and Spanish education from West Virginia State College, as well as an MA in Humanities from Grambling State University. Give it up for our HBCUs.
Yes.
And also holds an MA in German Literature and Philology, as well as his PhD in Medieval German Studies from The Ohio State University. And the title of his presentation is Introducing Dr. Georgiana Rose Simpson, the first African-American PhD. Dr. Bess, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay. Can you make me bigger, or how do I do that? I'm seeing your face there. Let's see. Oh, there.
You want to share
All
your
right.
Oh, you've got it? Okay.
No, still. All right, now, okay. Oops, I'm gone. Okay, can you hear me? You kept my
Yes.
computer. Okay, my computer's acting up today. All right. I just
Your
wanted to see.
audio and your visual are fine, so I can see you clearly and I can hear you clearly too.
Okay, but my picture on mine is very small. Anyway, let me go. I'll go. I'll start. This has been a rough day. Let's start with some numbers. In 1903, W.B. Du Bois published The Talented Tenth. There he introduced the term by which he meant the, quote, college-bred Negroes, end of quote, the racist, exceptional men who would fill up the Black masses. But at the turn of the century, nearly 3,000 of the 8.9 million African Americans had graduated college, with another 1,000 enrolled. His talented tenth was more accurately his talented 0.034%. The numbers began to creep up slowly, and by the 1920s, according to the Journal of Black Higher Education, 10,000 African Americans were enrolled in college. That's 0.1% of the population. Now, add to these numbers 3 more. In 1921, 3 scholars, Georgiana Rose Simpson, 1864 to 1944, University of Chicago, PhD in German philology, yay, my discipline. Sadie Mosel Alexander, 1898 to 1989, University of Pennsylvania, PhD in economics, and also the first president of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, founded in 1913 at Howard, HBCU, and Eva Dykes, 1893 to 1986, Radcliffe College, PhD in English. Y'all, this lady wrote 600-page dissertation. She later retired to Oakwood University there, where Ramona Hyman is holding sway. And then, once again, connections to HBCUs. Their routine clustering underscores the difficulty in determining exactly who was the first in the field. Dykes completed the requirement first, but Simpson, thanks to her earlier commencement, was the first to get the PhD. And so we say Georgiana Rose Simpson is the first African-American female to earn the PhD degree, 1921, the University of Chicago. I'll talk more about her dissertation in a moment. According to most sources, Georgiana Simpson was born 1 year after the Civil War ended, that is, on March the 31st, 1866. And so you can imagine that next month I shall celebrate her 158th birthday in some fashion or the other. She was born and reared and spent most of her time in D.C. She graduated from the Minor Normal School, a training school for Washington's Black elementary school teachers, the elites. This daughter of David and Catherine Simpson spent her years in D.C., with the exception of the time she devoted to study abroad and elsewhere. Having profited by other opportunities to study German by contact with Germans in the United States, she was encouraged by the inimitable Dr. Lucy Moulton, a name to be remembered, a mentor, to study the language and literature of Germany. She spent a year and a half in that country and would have remained longer had not her had not the serious illness of her mother called her back to the United States. That happened to me as well. On my Fulbright, I was at Universität Hamburg, and I had to come back after a year because my father fell ill. So the same situation as happened to Dr. Simpson. She later became a German instructor at the M Street High School, later became the famous Dunbar High School, named, of course, after Paul Lawrence Dunbar. And she continued her education through private instruction. In 1896, she traveled to Rostock, Germany, and let me add this. I also went to Rostock, Germany in the 1990s. I took a group of students there for a summer abroad program. She studied there, but we don't know if she studied at the university or if she studied privately, but we do know that she studied German language and literature in Rostock for a time. When Georgiana returned to the United States in 1897, she became assistant principal at the minor normal school, working again with Dr. Lucy Moulton. In 1901, she left minor school to teach German at the district school, famous school, Dunbar High School, where she taught for 30 years. Georgiana spent her career juggling work and study. Summers she spent at Harvard, Clark University, and the University of Chicago. Although not Chicago's first Black student, her decision to live on campus sparked a protest that ultimately prompted an overhaul of university housing policies. Her presence in the dormitory riled several white Southern women. They wanted her out. The head of the hall said no. Her name was Breckenridge, allowed Georgiana to stay, saying that no university policy denied her this right. 5 Southern white women moved out. Overruling Breckenridge, Chicago's president, Harry Pratt Judson, insisted that Simpson move off campus, setting a precedent for whites-only living facilities. She relocated and continued her studies, earning her bachelor's in 1911, her master's in 1920, and of course, a PhD in 1921. The housing issue wouldn't be resolved until 1923, when Judson's successor issued a proclamation saying that no, this policy will be dismissed, abandoned, thrown away with, it's over, it's out. Of course, this racial slight did not go unnoticed in Black circles, in the Black community. The following letter was sent from listen to it, Frederick Douglass, a senator, to President Judson, condemning their action to remove Simpson. The letter reads, "The case of Miss Simpson, upon your demand, gave up her room there and sought quarters outside of the campus, is one which has aroused deep interest and concerns in and out of university circles." And you know what that meant. We will talk to you later about that. The master's thesis. The title of the master's thesis is The Phonology of Merigarto. And I have it here, but I'm not sure that you would be able to see. It's a volume like this. I have my own copy, and it's signed. It has her signature. If you can see that somehow, I put it right there. It is right there. And that's her signature right there for the master's thesis at the University of Chicago. I have a copy of that. It's called The Phonology of Merigarto. It's a Bruchstück. It's a fragment of a poem from the 11th century that was found by the eminent German philologist August Heinrich Hoffmann von Fallersleben in 1834. According to Oskar Schade's Altdeutsches Wörterbuch Old High German Dictionary. Medigarto simply means, comes from the Middle High German mergat, meaning vermehren, umgebene, bewohnte und bebaute Land, roughly translated as an island surrounded by the sea. It is an anonymous poem written around 1090. It is divided into two parts. The first part reports on the separation of land and sea and the creation of the world. And the second part contains reports of miraculous creatures and waters along in lakes and other in the Mediterranean. Thus, this became the first geographic representation in the German language. The title to Georgiana Simpson's dissertation, and yes, it was not called a master's thesis at University of Chicago in when she got it. It was called a dissertation. She uses the first page contains the subtitle, Demonstrative Pronouns, Vowels, and Unstressed Syllables and Foreign Words Omitted. It was submitted to the faculty of the Graduate Schools of Arts and Letters as a candidate, when the candidacy for the degree of Master of Arts in 1920. The next page contains a bibliography with 9 entries. Pages 1 through 5 contain the 200 lines of the poem. Page 1 contains the line of the treatise, namely in a bold print, the title, Phonology of Medigarto. And then it shows you what she's going to be doing in terms of, she gives the original Germanic forms. She talks about the syllables, the vowels, and all the rest of that. We don't want to go into that. Initial vowels, medial vowels, final vowels. And in other words, it's a philological discussion of the poem. Georgiana continued to work as an instructor in modern languages at the Dunbar High School, but her increased prestige and ability had become so evident to the public that Howard University called her to a professorship at the institution in 1931. There she serves as an instructor until she reached the age limit and retired in 1939. Dr. Simpson was an enthusiastic advocate of the study of German culture, so much so that during the First World War, there was a witch hunt launched against her for being pro-German. She was investigated to determine her loyalty, and the nut job did everything they could to try to say that she was not a loyal American. It didn't work. It didn't work. Dr. Simpson showed her wisdom in upbraiding these people and showing them and telling everyone that we should be studying the language of the people, not condemning the language because the people had acted so nutty. Let me say this as an aside. I grew up in West Virginia, and my major, as Dr. Green said, was Spanish and German education. And however, I had to do my student teaching in Spanish because the state of West Virginia, in its ignorance, took out the study of German in its public school system right after this was happening to Dr. Simpson, right after World War I. Dr. Simpson was deeply interested in her race. He was a frequent visitor at the home of Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl. Dr. Simpson's interest in the Negro, quote, race was more clearly demonstrated in her teaching in the school room. She believed that every teacher of Negroes should be a teacher of the history of the race. And although an instructor in German and French, oh, by the way, did I mention that she wrote a biography of Toussaint Louverture, the Haitian revolutionary? She was very gifted, y'all. She had such an abundance of knowledge of her field that she had the occasion to mention it to the students in her classes. This is my conclusion. Dr. Simpson's dissertation, Herder's conception of das Volk was an analysis of language and ideas. Her analysis of Herder rested on the contention on the idea of das Volk. She explained, can't read my own writing. She explained that the different versions, the different meanings of Volk for Herder. The argument that common people were the highest representation of freedom and culture, and that the idea of common with the expressions reflected the basic utterance that people that was closer to nature than those of the aristocratic cultured class. She began the 59-page dissertation by explaining definitions of the people and displayed her mastery in language, specifically Old English, Old High German, Latin, and Greek, as she presented the etymology of the word Volk. She analyzed power dynamics between social classes, delineating the two senses in which the word of the term Volk. One, a nation as a group bound by blood or race. Two, a nation that does not suffer what is considered the deteriorating acts of realization. Last thing, Dr. Simpson, as I said, was very interested in doing all kinds of things. She was very brilliant. She communicated with W.E.B. Du Bois and offered to write, and I have the letter. I have a copy of the letter here it's in her handwriting, actually, to Du Bois. And she says, and I'll read it. Dear Dr. Du Bois, thank you for honoring me with the request contained in your letter. This is from November 5th, 1933. In response, I agree with you that the time has come when, quote, some authoritative collection, end of quote, such as you define in your letter, is on demand. I should be quite willing to contribute an article or articles suggested in a some philologic study of the so-called Negro dialect or the basic philosophy of Negro folk literature. So as we can see, Dr. Simpson was not only involved with German, but she was involved with the education in all aspects for Black youth, as I am. And I thank you very, very much and look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bess. Thank you to both our presenters. Again, I just want to remind folks that they can populate any questions, comments they might have using that Q&A feature at the bottom of their Zoom pages. Would love to kind of get some audience interaction in here as well. So I'll start with Cherita, just kind of thinking about the breadth of, what quilting water is and the amount of interviews that you've, interacted with. I want to kind of get a sense of what stands out to you. Like, what are the stories that stand out to you, or what are some of the nuggets that you're kind of appreciating about, this massive archive? 'Cause that's really what it is. I mean, lots of ways to describe it: an interconnected tapestry of stories, an archive, a kind of global storytelling project. What have you been able to pull out of such a massive, undertaking thus far?
I think one of the things that feels really powerful and important are the ways in which so many of our stories are connected and shared. I think oftentimes when we talk about, ecological issues or issues surrounding water, we automatically assume that there are going to be these repeat moments of trauma. And even in the video, there are these moments where those who we interview talk about some of the difficult relationships with water. But I think what the project asks us to do is to kind of think about these stories beyond just our initial connections to these trauma. And what I found really powerful in the interviews that I've done is that there's been a lot of joy. So many of the people who we've interviewed have talked about the ways in which water has given them life, the ways in which water has been a spiritual connection, the ways in which water has brought them deeper into relationships with other folks. And I think that's really kind of the beauty of what Quilting Water is asking. There are no single narratives. Even though we do have these shared experiences or these shared stories, so many of our relationships and our connections to water are different and personal and individual. And that, for me, really is what the interviews have kind of revealed is the beauty of that, the ways in which we can talk about these issues, like with what was discussed in the Philippines, but also with the connection to water that Norwood discussed in her interview, as a part of, a member or citizen of the Nancy Copeland Island Nape tribal nation, these misconceptions that we often have, but also what Titalope talked about with the ways in which water rejuvenates and refreshes and has given her life and the ability to give life to her children.
No, I think that's so powerful. And I recall that one of the in the interview you just showed, like one of the responders said that, water allowed her to begin again, even on a kind of daily basis, to kind of, you drink a glass of water and it's like, okay, now I know why I was kind of so edgy, right? Kind of gives you a moment to kind of reset and like, okay, let's start again,
Yeah,
right?
drink water and mind your business. That's it.
That's definitely a slogan for sure.
Yes.
No, so I definitely appreciate that. And I think you're on point with that, right? It's not just about trauma, it's about the different ways in which we communicate and experience water. And over a lifetime, I'm sure that if some of these people were to be interviewed maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they might have even different stories to tell than the ones they're telling right now, for sure. Dr. Bess, I wanted to kind of jump into kind of some of the details that you were exploring with Dr. Simpson's life. And this is really a story which I think all of us need to hear, even if we've kind of heard the name before, still kind of getting layers to the story, right? I think it's so.
Yes.
So you mentioned the date is 1921, where Dr. Simpson, right, completes her PhD at the University of Chicago. But then, right, within a couple of months, right, there are two other women, and you mentioned their names as well, who are also, right, breaking the kind of racial sound barrier when it comes to, and gender sound barrier, right? It's intersectional when it comes to, Black women and PhDs. It's 1921. I'm thinking of what's often called the Harlem Renaissance, but we know it's
You
also.
beat me to you took wait that I was about to say that.
Yes. I'm just wondering if there's a way to just give us more context for maybe why around this time period this is happening, because it feels like there's, of course, her individual story, but there's like a larger story to be told as well.
In fact, I'm the Black History Month speaker at Coastal University this coming Monday, and of course, I'm going to incorporate these three women into that. This was a time of high intellectualism among Black people. This was the thing we're going to show that we have deserved a seat at the table. I too, remember he said, I too sing America. I am the darker brother. You send me in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh, eat well, and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when the company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. That's what these women were talking about. That's what they were saying. I deserve a seat at the table. Later on, in the 1970s, Shirley Chisholm would say, if you don't have a seat, bring your own chair, So yes, they were there. They were part of this. It was a groundswell. As my German teacher would say, well, why was it happening? She would say, it's lag in der Luft. It was in the air. It was in the air. It was excellent. It was Black excellence. We're going to achieve. We're going to do this. Nobody's going to stop it. You saw Dr. Simpson, even though they put her out of the dorm, these other women suffered. Also, I didn't say that Dr. Alexander got put out. Dr. Dykes got put out. Dr. Dykes had to go and redo her bachelor's degree before she could go on and do the master's degree. And this happened, as you know, this happened to a number of academicians when they went from their school to one of these, quote, so-called white schools. They had to redo the bachelor's degree. Dr. Dykes did it, of course, with the 4 point. Then she showed them, here I am. And then she got her master's degree. Then she wrote a 600-page dissertation. Get out of here. So yes, they were determined to let the world know, here we are. Here we stand. We belong, and we're going to show you. And so they're part of the whole thing about Black excellence during the Harlem Renaissance movement. You're absolutely correct.
That's so fascinating to hear, because I think that like, you know, when you think about what they achieved, it's incredible all on its own, but also again a moment in a time where we have, you know, the Crisis magazine, and we have, you know, these little bonds in Washington D.C., and we have Dunbar High School, we have these institutions which are really rearing up like these young children who are, you know, becoming, you know, the Jesse Fawcett's and the, you know, the other people as
right,
well.
exactly.
It's really quite amazing in that context, for sure.
Yes, yes, indeed. They were part of that movement, and they made their contribution, and we let the world know, hey, y'all got to pay attention to these women. The book that the people who want to read more while I'm working on getting my book together, Black Women in the Ivory Tower by Stephanie Y. Evans contains a chapter on these three women. Also, there's a brother who's written a book on them. And I saw it on Instagram, didn't get my pen out fast enough, and I didn't write it down, but there's a book on these three women as well.
Okay. And I've just put the name of that book in the chat on the side, so folks can just have a record of that to look it up. So I want to switch back just between conversations here. One thing that struck me, Cherita, about the interviews was when one of the responders said that, you know, the fire hydrant was a memory that he had of water, right? And it struck me as interesting because, as he points out, it's made to kind of protect against fires, right? That's the purpose of it. But then people always find a way to repurpose the things that are made for one thing into something else, you know? And so I wonder if there were like other moments or just kind of other ways in which that meant something to you, where in stories about water, people were expressing not just simply kind of what the literal use might be, but also finding like these creative responses, you know, to how they met water, how they understood water, what water meant for them. Yeah.
I think Sammy's response is probably one of the the most creative when he was talking about the fire hydrant, and definitely has these kind of you know, kind of cultural and in terms of the specific location, has those references. But folks definitely, you know, in some ways talked about you know, how water can be seen as differently, or excuse me, as different in their experiences and their relationships to water. In terms of kind of like, you know, the creative kind of approach to it, we've had a lot of poets who have engaged in the interview process, and their responses have definitely been very interesting in the ways in which they see water in these very abstract ways. But I also think what's really important, and I spoke about this in the talk, is just this idea of like the ordinary people, the everyday people who are able to share their stories. You know, I've been fortunate enough to interview folks, and I showed the map from all over the globe. And again, kind of thinking about the ways in which they connect to it and look at it from spiritual aspects, from these very kind of forward ways of looking at water. Again, it's just like a way to hydrate, right? Something that, you know, you need to maintain cleanliness. You need it to make sure, you know, that you can get rid of a headache, you know, things like that. So I think what's really significant isn't so much about kind of the abstract ways in which people are connecting to it, although that it is, but it's the ways in which we're just kind of connecting to it realistically, and poetically and creatively, and the ways in which that all kind of connects our narratives and our stories.
Yeah.
Let me say something about water real quick. Since it's Black History Month, let's go back to Birmingham and the marshes and the children. We have learned through reading about this that the force of that water coming out of that hose could rip bark off of a tree. Can you imagine what it would do to the skin of one of those young kids, or older people for that matter? So you're right, water and its uses. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's actually important to point out, right? And that speaks in some ways to the connections to the trauma, but it also speaks to the, you know, historical of
yes.
shared histories of water. And again, while we've been fortunate enough to get the stories of joy and the personal, we've also, had the stories of the ways in which it can be destructive and has been used in ways of destruction far too often.
Yeah, joy and pain. That's a similar thing. Joy and pain. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I thought I'd bring that up because we just had someone to come to the campus and we talked about Fred Shuttlesworth's wife came to talk about her husband, and then one of the things she talked about was the Birmingham, march and kids and so forth and so on, and it brought in the fact that the water hose. So you're talking about water. Okay, I'm through.
But I also think that speaks too to like this process of this oral tradition, right? This old storytelling. And I'm on social media way too much, but folks often, especially in communities of color, like we're losing recipes, right? And I interpret that as a way of saying like we're not always getting these stories, we're not always getting these histories. And I think, what Dr. Bess is saying is extremely important. We're trying to expand this community to talk to folks of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all generations, of all communities. And it's important because oftentimes these histories, these stories, these traditions are disappearing. And we know, like with the ways in which things are kind of happening, where they're trying to silence particular stories, it's important to be able to ask those questions and importantly, hear and witness those answers. So that, Dr. Bess.
Thank you.
Yeah, because the questions, right? They're fairly simple, and I think intentionally so, right? It's like, what's a memory of water, right? What's the wish for water? But then I'm amazed by like through those those 5 kind of entrance points, so much comes out of that, right? You get history, culture, you get psychology, you get emotions. All those things, climate change, all those things come out of those, those very kind of simple questions. And so I think that speaks to kind of the brilliance of how just being simple, kind of taking time to listen, like those things are things which generate so much more. Yeah.
Taking time to have a conversation. I think that's the foundation of the project, just having a conversation and being open to listening.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I see a question in the Q&A. So this is for Dr. Best. Is it possible to get access to Dr. Simpson's master's thesis? This is from a fellow, it says in parentheses, a fellow Germanic philologist is asking.
Yes, you may get it from the University of Chicago, as I did. I sent some pictures for Dr. Pena to put up, but I don't know if you guys had a chance to see, because I don't know how to do the share screen. I went to the University of Chicago, and I got a copy of the master's thesis as well as a copy of the dissertation. Also, I took a picture. The University of Chicago dedicated a bus to her in 2018. And if you go to and I had it in here somewhere, if you go to the television station, you can see the ceremony. 2 students at the University of Chicago said, we need to honor this woman. People don't know about her. I, of course, had talked about her 10 years before they got to it. But anyway, they always do that. That's the way things happen. But the University of Chicago put a bust to her, and I took a picture with me and I sent it to Dr. Pena. It may be somewhere you can see it. That person can go to the University of Chicago and get a physical copy of the master's thesis and the dissertation.
Thank you for that. And just really quickly, to kind of follow up on that, you were mentioning that a particular poem that she was unpacking, right, in her critical work. And
for her master's.
For a master's, if you could say a bit more about that poem, because it sounded as if to kind of connect these 2 conversations about water, the poem was about discussing.
The poem was about water. Yes.
Right. Yes. So could maybe just say a few more words about that?
It's called Merigarto, which means it's a water surrounded by land. Surrounded by water, and it is the first physical description of this in the German language. And what she did was she simply analyzed it philologically. She looked at the vowel structure. She looked at the length of the vowels, whether the rhyming scheme. She didn't do a exegesis. She didn't talk about the kinds of words in the poem. She simply explained the form, as we philologists do, of the word. She didn't try to give you a textual analysis of the poem, but just from the title, the choice of choosing it, the idea of choosing it shows that she was interested in, because it deals with the origin of the beginning of the world. Merigarto, you know, it's the island surrounded by some water, and it's to be thought that that's the way existence began. So she was ahead of her time in everything she did.
So she definitely had some opinions about water and its kind of role and origins and beginnings.
Exactly, right, exactly. Definitely. Yes.
So as you were talking, I mean, like, we focused, of course, rightly so, on kind of her relationship to Germany and the German language, but clearly a multilingual scholar, right? So also, and I've done a little bit of work. I'm beginning, not fully, you know, on the path towards, but looking at kind of early African American writers, especially in the 20th century, and maybe some of their theories. For instance, Langston Hughes, also another multilingualist, right? Their theories of how language should be taught. In your studies of Dr. Simpson, have you come across kind of anything which gives us any clues in terms of her ideas about the ways in which language should be instructed? Like, I know at this time, for instance, there's, like, you know, the Berlitz model, where it's, you know,
she was ahead of her time. When I studied German at West Virginia State from 6 through to 6-7, it was a grammar translation method. We weren't taught really how to speak German. However, I got a scholarship to go there. At that time, this when Sputnik and there was the space war was going on, and so the United States government felt the need to train more teachers in languages, and so they created what was called the National Defense Education Act, and I got a scholarship to go to the University of in California, Irvine, and there they were teaching us how to become more fluent and get away from the grammar translation method. Obviously, Dr. Simpson had already gotten away from that because she had lived in Germany, which means that she was speaking German. She wasn't doing what I did, just the grammar translation method. She was way ahead of her time. And that's what she was teaching her students at Dunbar School and at Howard University. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. That's so
Speaking. She way past the grammar translation, which was the oral method that we came through in the 60s. She way past that.
That's interesting. I mean, so I was educated at Morehouse in the 90s, and it's funny that I think there are times in which, like, knowledge progresses, but also kind of moves in a cycle. And so we taught, like, with the translation.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
so that's
okay.
The picture. That's the picture. That's the picture of the bust of Simpson at the University of Chicago.
Nice.
I felt so good being there. Yeah, she was. I felt so good. I said, I got a PhD in German philology. So did she. She lived to be 78. I'm 78. I'll be 79 next week. We just love, and I'm teaching French. She knew French. She did translation of the Haitian fighter, Toussaint Louverture. I teach him in my French 101 and 102 class right now. And so, wow, it's just too much to think about. It's just wearing me out.
So in terms of linguistic diversity, I know that Cherita, you may have to leave in a little bit for another appointment, but I wanted to kind of just bring up one point about language as well that I was struck by in the most recent recording you just shared, where one speaker was talking about it. He mentioned the fire hose, right? The fire hydrant. Also, his father was speaking to him in Spanish about la ventana, right? To kind of open up the window, right? And like, what type of linguistic diversity have you guys encountered while kind of doing, this, creating this archive? I've seen the kind of the map where you're moving geographically all across the world, and I'm sure that you've encountered, like, so many different languages, not simply stories, but also languages that you're, counting upon, but also in terms of language politics and questions of language extinction, which is also a thing that we're thinking about in tandem with questions of climate and water, what you're seeing in terms of language diversity as you're doing this work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we are certainly prioritizing. We've been fortunate to do interviews with folks who speak Spanish. We did interviews a couple of years ago in Senegal with the more native languages, so Wolof, Sera, Mandika, French. We've been able to, and this is something that we are also wanting to kind of expand on and collect more of these interviews. But again, folks from the Philippines, from Japan. So we've been fortunate enough to be able to get interviews in these different languages. And one of the things that I think has been really important to the project is the ways in which we're, again, able to kind of like listen, have these conversation, and witness these different experiences. And all of those don't happen in, you know, English or standard or white mainstream English. Really important to this project, and the ways in which we're able to kind of connect and bridge the relationships between these different communities. You know, I'm from a small town in South Jersey, and it took me far too long to be able to be in conversation with folks who didn't talk like me. Something that I won't say as a point of shame, but it's definitely something that I've questioned, just as in my role as a teacher and a scholar. And it's something that I'm actually, it's really funny that you talked about linguistic justice, because it's something that I'm currently talking to my high school students who take comp classes, our college comp classes, about. And what I think I'm struck by the most in these conversations are the ways in which they say, well, I just don't talk right.
Yeah.
That to me is like, no, we're not doing that.
I know. You have to stop them right there. No.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So I think
Not that.
if anything, it gives us a way to, again, not only listen and witness, but a way to empower,
Exactly.
way to bridge that gap, a way to bridge those relationships, a way to bridge those communities, which I think is extremely important.
Yeah, and you get rid of the sense of self-loathing, because when the minute you hear that person say that, someone has told that person, "You're not worthy. You don't belong on this planet. Something's wrong with you. You can't, you know." And so the person walks around, head down, you know, bowed. No, we can't have that. Can't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in our classrooms, I mean, I think we have so many beautiful and brilliant students, but lots of times they need the authorization to speak. You know,
Yeah, they won't say, they'll just sit there. They'll just sit there because they've been told that what they're saying doesn't amount to a hill of beans, and they know what they're talking about. So they sit there and shut up.
And I think, you know, having like the literal language. I mean, I recall when I was at the University of Michigan getting my PhD in English, but of course there was a, you know, like what was called a foreign language requirement.
Yeah.
And taken French at Morehouse, again, under this kind of regime of, you know, grammar and translation, you know. I got to my first French class at the University of Michigan, and it was all in French. And I was at a loss, because I was like, I can read this stuff all day, you know, all day and all night. When it comes to actually like being in the class, I couldn't even ask the question to say, like, can you clarify what you're saying? I didn't have to, like, you know,
you've been taught a different way.
Yeah, but it taught me a valuable lesson that our students are often gifted in so many different ways, but need permission to say whatever language you have, that's adequate, and that's actually great. Use that language to get to where you need to get to.
Yeah, so, Maya Angelou says the same thing in many of her talks. So yeah, don't come with me with that. Yeah.
It speaks again back to the everyday folks, right? We all create literature, we all create culture, we all connect to literature and culture. You know, no one person's story is more important than anyone else.
The other, no, right.
How can you say that they're not worthy? So I think it's really important. If I can just say, if we could talk about the connection here, I noticed that both myself and Dr. Bess are wearing gray today, and we didn't this. But it just goes to show the ways in which we're always connected.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you might be kind of in a similar color scheme here as well.
And gray and blue go together, you know. So,
right.
Right. This is the grayish bluish. Yes. Okay.
No, I definitely agree. Yeah. Dr. Bess, you began your talk, you know, with the really kind of pregnant. I love a good first sentence. Like I think not simply for short stories, but also I think for academic papers, like a first sentence, like. And so you said, like, let's start with some numbers. And so like, I wanted to kind of connect that to kind of, for both of you, if you can kind of talk about what are the kind of like, what is the state of kind of language learning when it comes to Black folks now with German? You know, like, do we have a sense of like how many students are enrolling, studying the language?
That's an interesting point you make. Yeah, I have done a survey of let's go back to some history. After World War II, we had many Germans fleeing Germany who came and settled at HBCUs. You might have had somebody there at Morehouse, a German speaker who taught German there. They came, and German was very, very popular. But as I said, in West Virginia, those crazy people, the West Virginia State Board of Education took German out of the curriculum altogether in public school after World War II, because they did the same thing that the nut jobs tried to do to Dr. Simpson, saying that she was a Nazi sympathizer. Didn't work. All right. German was very, very popular. It was the #1 language. And then we German speakers got too proper, and we decided to impose too many standards. And students started saying, I'm not going to take that. You don't treat me like that because we got too uppity. So then Spanish took over. And so French for a while, and then Spanish. Harvard came through. I hate Harvard. I shouldn't say that. Harvard came through in the 1970s and said, the students don't need to learn a world language anymore. Back then it was called a foreign language. We call it a world language now. They don't need to have that. And so what happened? Black folk, in their ignorance, started taking out the foreign language requirement for the students there, and we've never regained that our presence in numbers at HBCUs or across the country, period. I want to let you know, if recently, one of the premier universities in West Virginia University, their flagship, did away with the Department of World Languages. We all cried. We said, what on earth is happening? But that's what's going on across the country. So good question. Languages, the study of world languages is in decline across the board. But we have, and I'm in a group that has developed a strategy to get more students of color, African-American students, and BIPOC people to study world language, to show them that it's significant for them to have it on their transcripts, have it on their resumes, for job interviews, for international jobs. You're just not going to work in Tennessee. You're going to work in Paris. You're going to work in Dubai. So we're trying to show the young people, our people, that it's more advantageous to have it on their resume, on their curriculum vitae, on your study guide, whatever you have, than not to have it. So good question. World languages studied in decline.
No, I think that's so relevant. And certainly where we live in a world where politically, like languages become politicized, and people think that to speak, as we're saying, like, for the context of World War I, right? The fact that people were speaking a language, and that was seen as a front to nationalism. So I think
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I know that Cherita had to go, but we thank her as she exits, just for her sharing her work with Quilting Water. Really important conversations. Thank you so much, Cherita. We appreciate your time. And again, if folks have other questions for comments for Dr. Bess, feel free to populate those in the chat. Dr. Bess, I was struck by when you were talking about Dr. Simpson's experience at University of Chicago, and she was forced to leave the dorm, right? Do we have any sense of where she actually stayed? I know she was staying off campus, but where she was?
I had that in my paper. I had 3 words that I have always used. One word is poised. There were cleaning ladies at the University of Chicago in those dormitories. They had to clean up. She didn't have any black professors, but she had aunties. They said, come on, baby, come on over here. We got you covered. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. They took her and put her in a place to stay. They fed her. They took her to church on Sunday. The black community rallied around her, as they did with same thing happened with Dykes and all the rest of a lot of other black people. When that happened, the black community came together. They saw what was happening. Those cleaning ladies said, "Oh, don't worry about it, baby. We got you covered." And they took her and gave her a place to stay. They fed her and took her to church, and everything happened perfectly. And she was able to get her degrees. Yes. Yeah, good question. Good question.
And
I left that part out.
We think of the institutions now, we think of kind of, the deans and provosts and chancellors and department chairs as being what an institution is. but we don't think about people who are custodians and staff members.
Exactly.
And so in some sense, the institution did come to her rescue, not the people in power.
Right. Yeah, she had somebody rescued her, but not the people that you would think they're not the people who were in power that would be able to do so. No, it was the aunties.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. That's so good to know, because I think that feels to me like a missing part of the story that I wasn't aware of. So it's good to know people. And she must have been probably also, you imagine kind of her walking down the hallway, and other folks may not have spoken to those people, may not have seen.
No, but it's just like I don't know if you know the story of Sylvia Fisher at Oklahoma when she was going getting her law degree. They made her sit outside of the classroom, and she had to take her notes that way. And people would walk past her, look at her, and maybe not look at her, but certainly not speak to her. And the same thing happened with Dr. Simpson. I mean, she was the only one there. She was not the first Black student, but she was the only one, as I was, taking German. Get out of here. And so, of course, she was an anomaly. She was, who is this woman? Who is she? Taking German? Get out of here. But she persevered, and she got the bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, we have a question coming out of the Q&A. So, Dr. Bess, you've also written a bit about Amo, the first Black person to earn a dissertation.
Who is that? And who is that? Tell me about
it's anonymous attendees. I don't have a name.
Okay.
But they're asking, what draws you to people like Dr. Simpson and Dr. Amo?
My skin color. I mean, they're Black. Dr. Amo, okay, for people who don't know, Dr. Anton Wilhelm Amo, April the 17th, 1734, the first Black person to earn a PhD degree. He earned it at the Universität von Wittenberg, the University of Wittenberg. He was one of the great intellectuals of that period. He taught at three different universities in Germany: Wittenberg, Jena, and the one that begins with an H there. He taught there. He earned his PhD there. He spoke several languages. He wrote, of course, in the scholarly Latin of the day, but he also spoke Dutch and French and German and Spanish. When racism reared its ugly head in the middle of the century, he was forced to return to his native Ghana. There's a statue. I'm going to Ghana this summer to pay homage to him. There's a statue erected in his memory as the first African to earn a PhD degree at a German university. Of course, I adopted his middle name. My middle name is Amo. Yeah, that's why. They did. They're in my blood. I can't help it. I get at it. They're part of me. They're part of my existence. Part of their persona is my persona. I live and breathe their accomplishments and try to do the kinds of things that they have done. I'm the first person to earn a PhD in German, Black person, from the Ohio State University, trying to do what they did.
That's amazing. That's and I love the way that you kind of honor them in your own work and in your own person, even literally in your own name. So when will you be in Ghana? I'll be in Ghana in the summer as well. I'm taking 14 students in May to Ghana. When will you be in Ghana?
I'm going with you. I'm getting my passport. I'm getting my passport. So just let me know. Send me an email, and I'll help you with the group.
I love it. We would love to have you with us.
Okay, I can do that. I was planning to go with last year. I was trying to go to the. Are you familiar with the Oswald convention? Oswald. I was trying to get on their program, and they didn't accept my paper. I was going to do something on Langston Hughes and Nicholas Guillen, but it didn't fit what they wanted, so they didn't accept it. I didn't go to that, but I was going to pay my way this year and go. But yeah, I can certainly go and help you in your group.
Well, we would love to have you. And I think, again, like this, discussion, it's centered on Dr. Simpson, but as we're seeing, like focusing on language, focusing on kind of culture, brings up a world of other opportunities for discussion and engagement.
Yeah, and I know some Swahili too. So if we get in a situation where I need to speak some Swahili there in Ghana, I help you with that. I can do it with the French and of course the German and the English. So yeah, I'll be there. I'll help you.
Thank you so much. We have another question from another anonymous attendee for Dr. Bess. I appreciate your careful and loving work in making these histories and experiences available to us. Can you talk a bit about the importance of archival work, both in preserving and recovering these histories?
Yes, I'm with the College Language Association. In fact, we're meeting here for our retreat, trying to get ready for our convention in April here in Memphis. We save work. You mentioned Morehouse. Our archives are at the Woodruff in Atlanta. All organizations should have an archivist. We have an archivist as a member of the executive committee. I think about digital humanities. I think about Mary Emma Graham out there in Kansas and what she does with archives. It is important for us, and then we have to be able to save them. The other thing with archives, Dr. Green, we've got to get people who know how to read cursive. Many of the archives are in cursive. So old folk like me can read them, but I won't be around there much longer. We got to teach the young folk, once again, how to read cursive so that they know what they're looking at and reading and preserving. So yes, every organization should have an archivist. And that archivist should also be somebody who can read cursive so that she can go back and pull out those documents and preserve them for progeny. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, earlier just prior to this panel discussion, we had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Donaldson, who was also on our BGHRA program committee, talking about the BGHRA archive and our conference archive. And so certainly we can't simply allow information to be passed out, talked about, disseminated, and then no one goes to collect and organize in a way that's
Exactly.
so that's definitely critical. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Bess.
Okay.
If there are no other questions or comments, I just want to give folks, if they have any kind of last minute observations.
You can give them out my email, bess_Reginald@yahoo.com. They can contact me that way.
Okay, let me write that down in the chat. Go ahead, please.
Okay. It's bess_Reginald@yahoo.com.
Okay. All right. I put that in the chat. So if folks follow-up questions, observations, they'd like to contact Dr. Bess about, please use that. And again, we thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thank you. I'm so glad I was able to get on. I had stressed by myself out and Dr. Payne, and I was going crazy, but it worked out just fine.
I think it did. I think it worked out just fine as well. And I've appreciated time just to have this one-on-one conversation with you at the end.
All right. And we'll be in touch about Ghana this summer.
I will for sure. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So